All right. Thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. Of course, I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme. Family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. Dr. Rawls, you could find the book up on Amazon. We had a big day recently. We just hit our 100th review on Amazon, so we're super thrilled. I give away the PDF of the book for free. I've been doing that since day one. We've given out a couple of thousand of the PDFs. If you want one, you can just reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn Messenger, and I'd be happy to send that to you today. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Go up, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Go up, give us a thumbs up, give a comment, ask a question. We'll definitely reply to you all. So I'm very excited. I have Dr. Bill Rawls on the show today, and he just came out with his new book, The Cellular Wellness Solution. Dr. Rawls, I said it's a new book. When was the book actually published?
Yeah, it was. It's about a year and a half, 2 years old now.
Okay.
So it's been out there a little bit, but it has, it's got a lot of information.
All right. So I've read every Lyme book, and I highly recommend it. It's very readable. It's very thoughtful. It's very well thought out, and it's perfect timing for me. Again, we're doing today's interview towards the end of 2024. We've done about 45 Love, Hope, Lyme podcasts. We're continuing to do more and more. And there's two topics that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. I've been wanting to do like Herbal's 101. I briefly talk about it in the book, but it's such a critical, important part for chronic Lyme survivors. And I want to get deep into that. You get very deep into the book. So we're going to be talking about that. And I also want to talk about the concept of understanding symptoms at the cellular level and
Sure.
why it's so critical to understand that. Also, we have a little special treat for all of our listeners today. I went to one of the more popular Lyme Facebook groups, and I told people I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Rawls. If you have any questions for him, please submit them. And Dr. Rawls, I got about 30 questions. So
Yeah, it happens.
So I picked out 9 or 10 of them, and you've been very gracious to say that you'll tackle them all. So we're going to cover a wide spectrum of things today. So Dr. Rawls, it's great to be talking to you. You've done so much great work. You provided so much value to the chronic Lyme community. I'm excited to get your answers on some of these questions. So let's get started. The book, The Cellular Wellness Solution. Explain why it's important to understand symptoms at a cellular level.
Yeah, everything starts at the cellular level, right? We are beings of cells. We are made of cells. Every living organism, the smallest functional unit of life is a cell. So everything came from cells, bacterial cells, a very, very long time ago, of course. And so our cells are independently functioning units. You can think of them as like little microscopic machines. And that makes us very different than, say, one of Elon Musk's robots, right? So that robot is a unit. And all of our man-made things, our cell phone is our unit, your car is a unit, something breaks on that unit, you got to have it fixed. It's not going to work until you get that one thing fixed. So our body isn't like that. It's a composite of trillions and trillions and trillions of these little things that we call cells. And each one of them is an independently functioning unit. So you can lose cells. It's like your heart. You're losing heart cells all the time. Your heart keeps right on pumping. So you don't have to shut down for repairs. You can build new cells, you can replace cells, and our cells can repair. So everything that happens in the body it results from the actions of cells. And we don't think about it this way, but it's brain cells that fire impulses and allow us to think. It's thyroid cells that produce thyroid hormone. It's heart cells working together to make the heart pump. So everything that happens is due to the actions of cells. So if all your cells are healthy and all your cellular functions are coordinated, so when we look at hormones and nerves and all the other chemical agents, what they're doing is connecting cells. So all of our cells have to be in constant communication with all the other cells for us to be healthy. So our brain is constantly monitoring what's going on the outside and what's going on in the inside and using nerves and hormone pathways to coordinate cellular functions. So if all that's working and all your cells are healthy, you'll feel great. But if cellular functions are compromised, then those cells aren't able to do their job as well. When they don't do their job, you feel it by feeling a symptom. So a symptom is a reflection of cellular dysfunction. And the labs we get, we're monitoring cellular dysfunction. But actually, your body is always talking to you, and even little symptoms that we ignore are suggesting that our cells are overstressed in that particular area. You have a sore knee, your cells are stressed in that area. You block a vessel in your heart and you stress your heart cells. You're going to feel it as pain, and your heart isn't going to work as well. So all symptoms directly reflect cellular dysfunction, every single symptom.
So this is the Love Hope Lyme podcast. We have a lot of Lyme survivors listening. Tie all that into what the Lyme survivors who are listening to the show and what they're going through. Bring this as make the Lyme connection here.
Yeah, that's all cellular too. It starts differently. So that evolution of Lyme disease, what's happening in the body, we relate it to a tick bite, but often people don't really get very sick at the time of a tick bite. Many people get a tick bite, they take on these microbes, and whether they get antibiotics or not, these microbes are stealthy. They don't win by aggression. And there are two main ways that they have of persisting in the body, which is what they want. All they want is a place to hang out and a platform to spread to other hosts. They don't need to make you sick. In fact, if they make you really sick, that works against their strategy, which is they want you functional so you can get out there and get more tick bites and spread to other hosts. So these microbes come on board, they course through the bloodstream, but one thing they do, unlike many other microbes, is they grow very slowly. And this has been documented for Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, every single one of the Lyme co-infections, but also a lot of other things that we're exposed to during life. So again, they don't need to make us sick. All they need to do is get through the bloodstream and get to cells in the body. And, like Borrelia, it can corkscrew into cartilage and other sources of food. Basically, what they want is food, but they can also invade cells. And different microbes, Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, Anaplasma, Rickettsia, all these microbes invade different cells in the body. But they invade cells throughout the body. And once they invade the cell, they're protected from antibiotics, they're protected from the immune system functions. And if the cells are healthy, if our body is healthy, a really big important survival mechanism is they slow down the growth or even go into a dormant state. So what that means is, like me, you can pick up these microbes from tick bites when you're a child and not know it and carry it through your whole lifetime and get sick in your mid-40s after you've been under a lot of stress. And that's what happens. Most of the people with chronic Lyme that I talk to don't remember getting sick around the tick bite. It was with a perfect storm of other factors. It's like, I talk to people and it's like, I was fired from my job, my house burned down, or I was in an automobile accident, or a lot of people, a stress like another infection, COVID, or something like the COVID vaccine sometimes can precipitate cellular stress in all these cells where you're harboring microbes, and then they start reactivating. And so that's basically what an illness like chronic Lyme is. So these things that we pick up through life, not just from tick bites, maybe from cat bites, hamster bites, contact with other people of different kinds, food we eat. There's so many ways that we pick up things that we now know can end up dormant inside our cells, not causing symptoms. And it's a reservoir of potential pathogens that are just there waiting for an opportunity. And they
I've,
do okay.
yeah.
If you're carrying microbes, which we all do, more than just what's in our gut, there we're talking about in our tissues and in our cells here. If we're harboring these things, but we're healthy, we have good health habits, then we have a balanced host microbe relationship. And they're okay with that. So we harbor these things, and it's not until we are stressed that these things start reactivating. And when they do, they start invading other cells and they start breaking down tissues because basically our tissues are food, right? So, and they get the upper hand. So there's a point that I call the boiling point, that where you've had building cellular stress, years of bad diet, not sleeping properly, mental stress, toxic stress, mycotoxins, all the other things that we're exposed to in our lifetime. These things build and build and build to a certain point that you start having more and more microbe reactivation, and they start invading cells, causing more cellular damage, more microbe reactivation, till the point that it becomes a vicious cycle. And that's what chronic Lyme disease is.
So,
But it's
yeah,
also what
yeah.
every other chronic illness is.
Yeah. So before we start getting into some of the details about ways to treat, I have a question. Uh, Again, as a doctor, like you mentioned, a lot of Lyme survivors I've spoken to, sometimes we ask, when were you bit? Right. And like you said, it's not like getting a mosquito bite or something. It's sometimes you don't even know that you got bit. A lot of times the tick will bite you in places that you can't typically see. As a doctor, is it important to know when maybe the infection began? Is that something that you spend time with your patients trying to track back and understand, or is it really not that critical because you're already down the path and it's really, let's just kind of get towards what needs to be
Yeah.
solved?
It's not that critical. When I do consults with people, now mostly my work has been online, and it's more like high level health coaching. I'm not managing medications. I'm just coaching people on how to get their lives back. And everybody starts with, here's when I got my Lyme diagnosis, and here are my symptoms, and here's all the treatments that I've been through, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next. And I'm just saying, okay, that's great. Stop. I want to know when you started having symptoms and what was going on in your life when that happened. And sometimes we go all the way back to their childhood. And I want to build out the reasons why that patient became sick. And so it's not just tick-borne microbes. We can pick up a lot of different things in our lifetime that can cause very, very similar symptoms to this. So again, these are really low-grade pathogens. They win by stealth. All they want to do is persist in our body. If we're sick, it's because our cells, the host has become compromised and allowed these things to have the upper hand. So I want to build out what were those stress factors and how did they come together? And that helps me and the person understand why they became ill in the first place. And then we start thinking differently, because then it's not like, okay, we've got to slam the microbes and kill these microbes. Yeah, we have to do that. We have to curb that microbe stress. We have to bring it down, but we have to restore our health, our cellular health at the same time. And if you're using therapies that are toxic to your cells, the chances of you getting well are pretty small.
Yeah. All right, so let's get deep into the conversation of herbs and antibiotics. So again, I want you to, again, I've been wanting to do a herbal 101 Love Hope Line for a while, so I'm glad to have you here, and your book goes deep. I
So how
also,
many how many hours do we have here?
well, we're going to try to knock it out in 40 some odd minutes. So actually, when I was doing all my initial research in the summer of 2021, I came across Dr. Buhner's book and really dug deep into it. May he rest in peace. So if you can give us like a 101, introduce us to herbs. Again, you wrote a whole book about it, but for
Yeah.
someone who really knows nothing, or if they finally discovered that, they have chronic Lyme, if you will. Talk a little bit about what they need to know about herbs. And again, it's a huge topic. You wrote a whole book about it. You do a lot of great webinars on your own talking about specifics. And I know a lot of people have specific questions about specific herbs, but kind of introduce us to why herbal treatment is one that is something that people should consider.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about herbs first. And then if we want to talk about herbs versus antibiotics, we can do that also.
We do.
But I
Yes.
think everybody has this misconception, I did, that herbs are like weak versions of drugs. And, and so you can take an herb, it doesn't have the side effects, but it's not going to quite do the same thing as a drug. It's apples and oranges. Herbs are nothing like drugs, and they don't work anything like drugs. And I think that's important to recognize right up front. But again, you said, yeah, herbs are a pretty wide spectrum. There are herbs that have drug-like properties, but those aren't the herbs that I'm really using in my practice and promoting here. So for sake of argument, we're talking about herbs that don't have drug-like properties. And so what we're looking for them for is to heal the body, basically. And they do that in a variety of different ways. So no matter what drug you're talking about, a drug is a single chemical that has a specific action of blocking a pathway or a reaction or affecting an enzyme. And the whole purpose with drugs used for chronic illness is we want to reduce the symptoms or reduce the manifestations of the disease. What they don't do is get to the root causes of disease, and that's why people typically don't get well with drugs. So when you get to the root causes are the things causing cellular stress. So our cells, those little microscopic machines, need 5 things to be healthy. Every cell in our body: the right nutrients, clean, toxin-free environment, downtime in the form of sleep to recover, good blood flow from exercise, and protection from microbes. That's it. That's the formula for wellness right there. And the reverse of that, those toxicity of those things is the root cause of all chronic illnesses. So when we look at our drugs, they do nothing to help with those things, with exception of maybe antibiotics killing microbes, but we're going to come back to that. So when you look at a plant, an herb, we're talking about not one chemical with a targeted action, but absolutely hundreds or even thousands and thousands of chemicals present in that plant. So you have to understand that what we're basically doing is borrowing the plant's system of protecting itself and taking care of its cells. So plants are multicellular organisms just like we are. And plants must protect their cells from microbes, free radicals, toxic substances, metabolic imbalances, radiation, all of these things that are a threat to our cells. The plants are having to protect their cells too. So when we take an herb, we're basically taking this complex chemistry of the herb that the plant is using to do those things. So when we take in an herb, we're getting broad spectrum antimicrobial properties. We are getting potent free radical neutralizers. We're getting things that neutralize a wide range of toxic substances, radiation. Most herbs have some anti-diabetic properties. They protect us from excessive carbohydrate consumption. But we're also getting some of the regulatory chemicals that the plant is using to coordinate its cellular functions. And many of those chemical messengers are the same as ours. So herbs like adaptogens contain some of those chemical messengers that are helping to balance our stress hormones and normalize that cellular communication that's going on in our body. And basically, that's what we're getting with an herb, with a plant. But probably the most important property of any herb that is used is the antimicrobial properties. And I think that's where that's where we come in to using them for Lyme. And I think that's really important. We can talk about that next if you like.
I want to talk about some of the specifics that you talk about in the book and uh, give some insights into how you get treated. Again, so if I'm like a chronic Lyme survivor, how do you assess which herbs I need to take? Do you go after symptoms? Do you go after overall care? Give some ideas on if I'm a chronic Lyme survivor and I don't know as much as I need to know, how do I figure out what the best course of treatment would be?
Yeah. Well, I look at it from a point of view of cellular stress. How stress factors came together to precipitate that cellular stress and what's still going on. Is the person sleeping? Do they have gut dysfunction that they need? Are they nourishing their body? Or do they have exposure to mold? Well, we want to minimize these cellular stress factors in the environment. But at the same time, the first order of business is getting control of this microbe frenzy that's driving the cellular destruction in the body. Herbs are really important for that because of their antimicrobial properties in a general sense. So all herbs have antimicrobial properties, but some have better antimicrobial properties than others depending on the microbe stress in that plant's natural environment. It's like rhodiola is a wonderful adaptogen from Siberia. It is, it's harsh physical environment there, great for helping us adapt to physical stresses. Yeah, it's not that great an antimicrobial. Cat's claw from the Amazon, moist, warm environment, lots of microbe stress, great antimicrobial. So even though all plants have antimicrobial properties, some are better than others. And quite frankly, a lot of what we're using for chronic Lyme disease came from Stephen Booner, who you mentioned. In 2005, he published his first book, Unlocking Lyme. He didn't have chronic Lyme disease. He actually had been exposed to hepatitis C and was looking at herbology for helping that and was able to normalize his life doing that. But he became interested in Lyme. So he started looking for plants that had been used for illnesses we now know are caused by infection or other spirochete illnesses like syphilis, and what had actually found to have value, and applying that knowledge to say, okay, maybe these things might help with this other spirochete, Borrelia. And he was just looking at really Lyme in that first book, and he pulled together this assortment of herbs, and people did exceptionally well. And I credit that for basically saving my life because I embraced that particular protocol. But then, as things got more complicated, we started looking at co-infections, and he wrote more books and more herbs and lots more research. And where I parted with him is looking at these things as low-grade pathogens that want to persist in the body and not necessarily high-grade pathogens. And if someone is sick, it's because the terrain has been disrupted. He was looking at them more, these are the ones to kill these particular pathogens. And if you read all of his books, which I did, they're sitting on that bookshelf back there, you'll realize that if you wanted to cover for all the co-infections, you'd be taking 100 herbs every day. And I found that wasn't necessary. So what we found is a lot of the herbs have broad spectrum coverage. So even after he passed away, institutions like Johns Hopkins and others in the country started looking at these herbs for their value as antimicrobials. And they looked at, activity against Borrelia, but then an independent study against Bartonella, and then another against Babesia. And what you find is these same herbs are covering these very different microbes. And, you don't see that with antibiotics because antibiotics are these single agents.
Mm.
So I found you don't really have to have dozens and dozens of herbs. You start with a core. And what I found in my recovery, though, is after you take something for 6 months to a year, you start developing tolerance to it. that may be an effect on the pathogens becoming resistant, but it's not the same kind of resistance that you see. We don't create super bugs with the herbs. They just don't respond quite as well. Or we start processing those chemicals. So I started, rotating to other herbs and learning about new things. And I just kept doing that until I completely got my health back. So a lot of that comes from that core knowledge, which I think is very valuable. But since then, I've literally found, more than 100 of herbs that have value, and there are probably many, many more out there. So the message with the herbs is they just have such great broad spectrum coverage, the difference in antibiotics and the difference in herbs. And this is really key. And that's why what makes herbs a better solution. Antibiotics are single chemical agents that affect fast growing bacteria. Now, I've already said these things, one of their survival mechanisms is slow growth. All the antibiotics depend on growth to work. So it's the faster something grows, the better they work. So, tale of two microbes. Pneumococcal pneumonia. The pneumococcal bacteria invades locally in the lungs, causing pneumonia. It is turning over every 20 minutes. It's doubling its size every 20 minutes. That means somebody can get very sick very fast. And an antibiotic can save their life because it works on those fast growing bacteria. Borrelia, in its most active state, doubles every 12 to 24 hours. And that's in the active state. So no antibiotics are going to hit it in the same way that you do that pneumococcal bacteria. So that's why a lot of the Lyme doctors use like 6 months of antibiotics. Well, the problem with that is those single chemical agents disrupt every bacteria in the body, including your normal flora, and you actually hit the normal flora harder than you hit those intracellular pathogens. So even all it takes is 10 days to start disrupting your gut flora and making a wreck out of your gut. Herbs don't do that. With the herbs, we're talking about a system. That system has a certain intelligence about it. So plants have to take care of their normal flora too, and they target pathogens. So something's actually been documented by scientific studies is herbs don't disrupt the gut flora. In fact, I found that herbs work better than probiotics in most cases. So you can take them for a long time. I've been taking herbs continually for 15 years. So that's a really important factor. The other is that antibiotic resistance. As I said, it seems you develop tolerance, but you don't develop the same kind of superbugs, the antibiotic resistant bacteria. And that has become an enormous problem in the world that is much worse than chronic Lyme. And it's a huge threat to our entire population because we've been overusing antibiotics for years and they haven't made any new antibiotics since the 1980s when I was in medical school. And the reason is it costs a lot of money now to bring a new drug to market. And they're investing in drugs that people take for chronic illness that don't make them well, that they take for their whole lifetime, not in antibiotics that somebody might take for only 10 days. So we don't have any new antibiotics, and there's resistance to every single one of them. So when you expose someone to 6 months of antibiotics, that's a huge deal. You're putting them at high risk of developing antibiotic resistant pathogens in their body and destroying their gut. You don't see that with the herbs. Plus, antibiotics are toxic to our cells and our mitochondria. Herbs promote cellular wellness. That's the whole point. They do that. They're doing everything we need to solve this problem. And that's why the herbs are so remarkably important.
All right, once again, thank you so much for all that information. I think you really did a great job at answering the question, like, what should I take? Is it 50%, whatever it might be? And I really encourage people to go read the book, The Cellular Wellness Solution by Dr. Bill Rawls. He goes into deep and it's very readable, like I had mentioned. So Dr. Rawls, I just want to acknowledge you again. When I first started to research this world and understand what had happened to someone in my life, I came across your work. I attended a bunch of your webinars, and I just want to acknowledge you. I know you're also a Lyme survivor as well, and you talk very clearly in your book and on your webinars about why you've made it your life's passion to help people understand these questions. So, again, the book is The Cellular Wellness Solution. Dr. Bill Rawls. I want to thank you again, and also just for listeners too. He goes into the book in a lot of, as you mentioned a couple of times, the pathway to wellness: sleep, nutrition, stress, toxic environment, or removing toxins from your environment. So I just want to acknowledge that and encourage people to pick up the book to
Yeah,
find out
thanks.
more about that. All right. Once again, this is the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond.